Each sport has its own unique thing when it comes to community and when it comes to culture. Soccer is kind of this situation. For soccer, it's devotion. I mean, not even like typical, oh, bandwagon, fair weather devotion, like Cleveland Browns level devotion. Nearly every person who roots for a soccer team is that on par with the Cleveland Browns fan base. They show up every game. They don't care if they win or lose. They're there for the event. They're there for the culture. They're there for the environment. And they'll be supporting them no matter how bad they are. Now, the NFL, on the other hand, a different kind of football, has a fan base that is very communal. I mean, I've witnessed this when I was at one of Tom Grossi's gatherings, little, fan gathering and stuff, and I was just shocked to see so many NFL fans at this event, and we were all just, talking, having a good time, chatting, and there were Titans fans there because I live in Nashville, but there were a lot of Packers fans, Seahawks fans, Saints fans, Bears fans, Vikings, Lions, Giants, Jets, Dolphins, 49ers. You could pick. Nearly every single team was in some way represented there. And whenever I go to like NFL games in general, I also notice that. I got the opportunity a while back to go and watch the Colts play at Lucas Oil. That's my team. And I was shocked not just to see like an abundance of blue and white, but I also saw a bunch of people who were fans of the Bears, fans of the Packers, fans of the Steelers, fans of the Bengals and the Browns and Detroit, and also like 49ers fans, people who were fans of the Seahawks, the Pats. Somehow they got in there. Bills fans. We saw Dolphins fans. I saw Jags fans. I saw fans of the Falcons. I saw Titans fans. I saw an all big variety of people. And even when I went to an Titans draft party, the Tennessee Titans were hosting a NFL draft party about a year or so ago. I got to go. I saw a wide variety there as well. It wasn't just Titans fans. NFL builds itself entirely around being a communal game. It's not really tribalized. Yes, there is tribalism, especially amongst the diehards. But when it comes down to it, NFL is itself the fandom in a way. Like, NFL fans are very communal. And when the opportunity comes to building up or being together in that situation, they show up. Because in a weird way, the shield matters a lot. The league matters a lot. And so that's how NFL fans operate. So while soccer is very much diehard for the local team or for a specific team, NFL is more communal, more towards the global, the whole league, as I say global, but the whole league itself. They very much come together. Baseball is religion. What do I mean by when I say that? Well, especially in the world of today where things are becoming, at least if you, depending on your economic status and social upbringing, you are more than likely to be less and less religiously devoted or focused into the sacred world. You are more or less secular. Everything starts to become a bit more secular. And yet baseball is the only game that I can think of, outside of maybe a couple others, that really puts an emphasis on the supernatural and makes that a key component to its fanaticism. Don't believe me? I mean, I got examples here. But sometimes when you witness, but usually like when it comes down to it, like a lot of these moments within the superstition of baseball, being a baseball fan, we tend to mostly notice it in a longer curve, right? Like, for example, the Chicago Cubs are notorious for having a 109 year, I believe, World Series drought. The last time they had won the World Series before the most recent one was in 1908. And then they finally won it in 2016, 10 years ago, by the way. And I remember watching that game. I remember watching Game 7. The World Series went all the way to Game 7. I was there in university with a friend who was a adjunct professor who was a diehard Cubbies fan, and we watched it together. It was me, him, and like 5 other people. We were all watching the Cubbies play, and because where I went to school, there were a lot of people who were basically coming in from like the Chicago area, and watching that final out was a religious experience. It was amazing. It was so cool, and like I remember seeing him. I remember afterwards, just like kind of walking by, and I remember seeing him call his grandparents. Like that was such a beautiful moment to witness. You know, just like where he's like, you know, he's calling his grandparents and he's saying, "Hey, did you hear that the Cubbies won?" Just like that. It's that familial bond, you know, that the sort of thing like that, and having that moment of sharedness together. I'm pretty sure, you know, Red Sox fans would gladly tell you about the time when the Red Sox won the World Series, broke the curse of the Bambino, and basically said that you know, probably the first thing they did was call their mom and dad or call their grandparents or something. There were people who used to. I mean, I've even heard stories about how people would leave Red Sox merch at the gravestones of the loved ones who passed on before they could witness this moment. And so there are these ritualistic there's these ritualistic things that we do within the world of sports, and baseball embraces it 110%. Now, far too often we usually focus on the curses or the superstitions that have been a part of a longer arc, right? Like the 108 years or the 90 something years with I believe it was 70 years for the Curse of the Bambino. It might have been, I think it was like also 80 years for the White Sox or something like that. There's these long playoff or these long World Series droughts. And we love to focus on those, but what if there was a new ritual to be created? What if we're witnessing the beginning of a new potential ritual in the world of baseball as religion? Now, what do I mean by that? Well, sports fans in general have been notorious for trying to hex or unhex teams. One of the best examples that I can point up to, let me get my... So the New York Mets, back in mid-April, were experiencing one of the worst losing skids in team history. And they tried everything that they could to unhex the team. And guess what? None of it worked. If I remember correctly, I believe they played the Reds during this time, which is actually my team, the team I root for. And they lost, and so everybody's like, what's going on here? We lost to the Reds. What's going on here? Hell's freezing over. Which, by the way, yeah, it was freezing over. It was pretty cold in hell that day. But the Mets tried everything that they could. I remember one specific attempt where they actually tried to. So one of them involved doing like some sort of sacred smoke, like kind of like basically bringing out sage and trying to burn it outside of the main stadium, outside of like the main entrance in the stadium, and it was this sort of like neo-paganism thing. Being Native American, I'm somewhat familiar. Whenever I use the term sacred smoke, that's kind of something that you hear about from some of my tribal relatives and family members. So I probably appropriated that word there from my family. Apologies. But there's also instances where they hung up horseshoes and like candles, and it didn't work. They even tried to bring Grimace back to the games because Grimace was becoming like a meme for them. They apparently were winning a lot of games with Grimace there, and so they kept on bringing him back. And lo and behold, even Grimace couldn't fix it. So in the end, yeah, they ended up getting a win, and I think that I don't know if they've really been doing well since then. I haven't really been able to follow baseball that much ever since the Reds basically flew too close to the sun, had an amazing April, and then basically fell off to the face of the earth, and now they're obliterated. They're like 15 games behind the Brewers. And, but anyway, aside from that, one game that I kind of came to my attention was just yesterday with the game between the Cubbies and the Dodgers. Now, this game in by itself is kind of notorious already because it was the game where Skubal, who had just been traded to the Dodgers by the Detroit Lions, not Detroit Lions, but the Detroit Tigers. He had been traded. He was basically the ace of the Detroit Tigers pitching core. He's a really good player. And going to the Dodgers, who had just won the World Series, and I believe had just repeated as World Series champions, it is a situation where everybody is hating on the Dodgers because, one, they care a lot about winning, which every team in Major League Baseball should, and two, they are willing to put their pocketbooks to that. They're willing to, cash their what's the term? Their mouths are making checks and their asses are cashing them in. They're putting their money where their mouth is. And they know what they're doing. They're smart. Now, whether or not this is going to be beneficial to them in the long term, because the contracts that they've been signing and making deals with, like, for example, with Shohei Ohtani, and I wouldn't be surprised with the deal with Skubal as well, is going to be something along the lines of, like, we'll pay you very minimal upfront, but for the next 15, 20 years, you're going to get a lot of money. It's literally the Bobby Bonilla contract structure, and which is what happened with former Mets player Bobby Bonilla, who basically backloaded his contract to where after he, for the last like 20 or so years, he's been getting a $1 million paycheck on, I believe it's like every August. It's somewhere in the middle of like July or August. And he gets a paycheck from the New York Mets because they backlogged his contract. They backloaded it basically to where it was actually even beyond the playing years, the time of which he was playing. They did the Dodgers have done that with Shohei Ohtani as well, to where right now he's not actually getting paid the quote unquote 40 or so million that he's actually owed. He's getting paid like a pretty small number. And right now his sponsorship deal is subsidizing the rest of the money that he actually technically should be getting as far as his contract that he signed. But after he's done with the Dodgers, whether, he decide basically after the so many years that he is legally obliged to be a part of the team unless he retires, he will, after those years are done, he will be getting basically the money that he was supposed to get during that original playing time period. And it will be coming in a yearly basis. It is literally Bobby Bonilla Day, but now it will be Shohei. But in the next 20 years, we will now remember it as Shohei Ohtani Day, unless the Dodgers decide to buy out his contract some way. Well, anyway, this caused a massive uproar, especially in the world of baseball fanatics, because one, the idea of a team buying their way to a championship is something that I would argue that fans don't really like to admit is the process, especially in the world of professional sports. Like, we love to think that, oh, you just built a team of up-and-comers who are making their show and, basically showing their stuff off right now. But what it actually is that, hey, money talks. Money ends up showcasing who is winning. And the Dodgers are willing to talk the talk and walk the walk. And honestly, good on them. I don't really care. Good on them. But in the end, you still have to play the games. And the Dodgers have not been doing that well right now. Going past into just right around this time right now, they've lost 4 straight. Going into this game, they lost 4 straight. And so as the trade deadline had come into play, they got Skubal from Detroit, and everybody freaked out because here's a guy who's supposed to be this really good pitcher, and now he's going to be basically be a part of the super team that's established. And, does that really change the situation for the Dodgers? Well, look at the scoreboard. It did not. Because in the end, while Skubal did what he needed to do for the 6 innings that he played, it ended up not working. Because relief came in and the Cubbies basically took him to town. And ended up winning 5-1. Now the Cubs are actually only 4 games behind the Dodgers in the National League pennant race. And ultimately, they're only like maybe a few games, I think, behind the Brewers, who lead in the NL Central. So it's just one of those things. Baseball is one of those weird games. Now, it also doesn't help that Skubal led up a massive pop against Dansby Swanson, who knocked it out into deep left field and basically allowed the Cubbies to basically go into the relief switch tied. So right around the end of so basically like his homer came in at the bottom of the 3rd, and they came into this bottom of the 6th still tied, and then Skubal is relieved, and then everything starts to collapse from there. So really, Skubal did a good job. It's just the loss came from the poor support. Now, what does this have to do with Cookie Monster? I'm pretty sure you're watching this and you're just thinking, okay, what the hell does this have to do with Cookie Monster? Well, one thing's for certain is that the Chicago Cubs are notoriously one of the most superstitious teams in baseball. I mean, they have a freaking curse that was affiliated to a freaking belly goat. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. It is one of the stupidest things you could think up of, but they believed it. And they did everything that they could in order to try and break the curse. I mean, seriously, the Wikipedia page is hilarious. And really, it ultimately ended up falling. The curse basically was broken when the Dodgers won the pennant. I mean, not when the Dodgers won the pennant, but when the Cubs won the pennant against the Dodgers in the 2016 NLCS. And then they went on to win the World Series against the Cleveland Indians. Or the then Cleveland Indians, the now Cleveland Guardians. And one of the things that I've found when it comes to Cookie Monster is that he loves to go to Cubbies games. Now, yesterday they also were having this basically celebration of National Chocolate Chip Cookie Day, and who better to represent one of the greatest desserts to ever be created than Cookie Monster. And one of the traditions of being such a marquee figure in the world of children's entertainment, children's television, but also being one of the most recognizable Muppets in the world, and you're in Chicago, you're in the north side of Chicago, you're at the friendly confines, you gotta sing the 7th inning stretch. You gotta be a part of that and sing Take Me Out to the Ball Game. And guess what? Cookie Monster did. And you know what happened during that? You know what also happened? The Cubs won. Now, you might think, oh, this is just one of those instances of a pure coincidence. And if it were just one instance of Cookie Monster being there and being a part of this event, singing at the 7th inning stretch, and the Cubbies ending up winning, then I would totally agree with you. And I wouldn't have made this video. But this is not the only instance where Cookie Monster has been at the friendly confines and has sung Take Me Out to the Ball Game, and the Cubbies have won. In fact, in 2019, Cookie Monster was back at it at Wrigley. It was a game between the Cubbies and the Braves. And you know what happened? The Cubbies won. Sometimes you get these little instances of just absolute beauty where you think that there might be something to this. Now, Chicago is notorious. Now, look, the Northsiders are notorious for having a bunch of different people singing the seventh inning stretch. Probably some of the more famous ones are Bill Murray. He's a devoted Cubbies fan, and watching him sing, honestly, watching him do anything is always going to make me laugh. He's just one of those guys who's just naturally funny. But having Cookie Monster be a part of this, to partake in this ritual, partake in this action, and in every time he's been there that we know of, they've won. You know, this is not just, I don't think you can call this a coincidence anymore, at least to the eyes of diehard baseball fans. Because remember, baseball is religion. Baseball community, the fanaticism that is a part of baseball is religious and superstitious, but also religious. And you know what else is very interesting? The performer of Cookie Monster, his name's David Rudman, and he's been there for a long time. He's been performing as Cookie Monster since 2001. Oddly enough, I didn't know this, but apparently Frank Oz used to play as Cookie Monster, which I always knew that he played as Fozzie. And for those that don't know, Frank Oz is the guy who played Yoda in Empire Strikes Back. He's notorious for being one of the greatest puppeteers alongside Jim Henson. It was him and Jim Henson who basically brought the Muppets to life. Fozzie and Kermit, those are the two. That's Jim. Kermit was Jim Henson. Fozzie was Frank Oz. Also Miss Piggy. Frank Oz was also famous for being Miss Piggy. Well, David Rudman plays Cookie Monster, and you never guess where he's from. He's from Chicago. Went to school at Highland Park, just about an hour north of Chicago. And that's just because of traffic. I'm pretty sure it's actually a lot closer. And so he has this connection with, more than likely already has a deep connection with the Cubbies. And because this has happened not just once, but twice that we know of. And the Cubbies have also had different types of like promotions with Cookie Monster. But from what I can understand, they had a bobblehead. They had like a Cookie Monster bobblehead as well, but that led to them losing. So I think really what you need to do is you need to have Cookie Monster in physical, in the flesh, or in the felt, there at the game, singing and being a part of the seventh inning stretch tradition at Wrigley. And guess what? You're going to see more of this. At least you think. But once again, we're secular people. We're logistics-based brains. We're logic-based brains, right? Or at least that's what we want to think we are right now. Or at least that's where we want to think we're evolving or we're moving towards. And in order for this to really be proven, we're going to need more data. So this is my proposal to Cubbies fans. Get in contact with Chicago. Get in contact with the Cubs organization. Let them know that we need more Cookie Monster. We need him back. And this is even coming from a Reds fan. I mean, I've already accepted defeat that the season is done for. So don't worry about me. But maybe see what happens when the Cardinals come into town. Or maybe when the Pirates decide to show up and, you know, yeah, sure, that game's already going to be a loss for the Pirates, but like, you know, it'd be kind of nice to pad the stats a little bit. Maybe see what happens when the Dodgers come back. Or maybe see what happens when the Cardinals come into town. Or maybe see what happens when, you know, maybe it's a, you know, crosstown game against the White Sox. Something to think about. But, you know, there's something here. And if anything, bring back Cookie Monster. And I mean, what's the worst that can happen out of this? I mean, you just got to clean up after the guy. Anyway, I just wanted to talk about that. See ya.